All right, old friends, new friends, everyone else, what is going on? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, however you consume Talking Buffalo. Appreciate you guys very much. If you're watching this on the video side or the audio side, I suppose, too, make sure that you follow, like, subscribe, all that nonsense. Big shout out to today's sponsors, Sunny Reds. 1841 Aber Road, just down the way from Highmark Stadium. That brand new outdoor patio is bumping. I did a live show with the Bulldog from WGR last week there. Great time, man. Great food. They got music out there now, too. So great place to be. And also Imperial Pizza, 1035 Aber Road, just down the way from Sunny Reds. I'm going to be there with a live show next Thursday night. Matt Perino and Matt Fairburn, both of them are going to join me. That will be a good time, so look out for details for that. All right, folks, our Friday episode, I am joined right now by recurring guest, buddy of mine over from Two in the Box, my man, Chris Ostrander. What's going on, dude? How you doing?
Not too bad. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. I missed the show Monday, so I'm kind of making up for it, kind of bulk taping a few episodes to have in the can. Not this one, but other ones, just in case something happens. Again, we're going to talk Sabres, more specific. I've been waiting all week to talk to you, by the way. I've reached out to you earlier. I've had some good episodes this week, but mainly football stuff. I've been waiting to circle back around to the Sabres and talk to you specifically all week. I just feel such a sense of a lack of urgency right now with this team. I know you've written about it. I know you've done on your podcast, the Instigator podcast. You've talked about it. We're going to cover that, some Sabres stuff today. Before that, though, two things that I wanted to ask you about. And you're going to have to refresh my mind with a couple things. If you follow, folks, if you're on Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it, there's, every once in a while you get a viral tweet that just everybody sees that shit. And there's one going around about, tell someone about like lore from your past or whatever. And we've all, had our various things. I saw you earlier in the week. It was yesterday. You hid for 3 hours in a 200-level bathroom suite to go to a game. Explain this. What the hell are you talking about, man? I want to know about this. What's Chris Ostrander's lore, something about yourself, your lore about yourself?
Yeah. It's a decent enough story. So this 2007 playoffs, so 2006-07 season, conference finals versus Ottawa. So I'm still in college at that time, playing hockey, and my one roommate, I think he was my roommate, it was at the next year, it doesn't really matter. One of my teammates was interning for the Sabres. He had a family member that worked in the front office, and so he was driving up from Cleveland during the first two rounds to intern, and then continued through the end of the school year in that conference final. And so by the time the conference final rolls along, obviously school is out, we're home, and he sends me a text or calls me. He's like, hey, do you want to try to go to game 2 tonight or tomorrow? I'm like, yeah, like, how are you going to get me in? That sold, games, they sold out the whole season, right? All these games have been sold out for ages. There's no chance I'm getting a ticket. Mm-hmm. He goes, listen, all you got to do is you dress up like an intern. You're going to walk in with me. There's no way security's asking you questions. And then you just got to hide in the arena till the doors open. So he drives us from Cleveland that day, and I don't remember what time we got to the arena. I guessed 3 hours when I tweeted it. It could have been 4. I don't remember the exact time frame, but we got. So I put on button-down shirt, khakis. I dressed the part to look like an intern.
Mm-hmm.
We show up. Might have had a tie on. I don't remember. We get to the arena. I'm like, all right, are you sure this is going to work? Like, you cannot. Don't shit me here, because if I get kicked out of the arena for life, I'm going to be pissed off. And he's like, no, trust me. The security guard, he's seen me for the last 2 or 3 weeks, however long it had been. There's no way he's going to give us any grief. And lo and behold, we walk in the security entrance down there at Cuba. Well, at that time, HSBC Arena. Guy gives us a wave. We go upstairs. Didn't check the credentials. I don't remember the guy's name, so I don't think he works there anymore. So hopefully I'm not getting anyone in trouble now, but it's 20 years.
There's a statute of limitations on that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we go upstairs. We go up the for those of you who have or haven't entered the arena through the security entrance, there's the elevators that serve all 3 levels, if I'm not mistaken. But, he knocks me out at the 200 level. He goes, "You just got to find somewhere to go." He goes, "Hide in the bathroom. I don't know what you're going to do." But the doors opened I think the doors opened at 5 back then. If I'm not mistaken, maybe 5:30. So let's just assume we got there at 2:00 and the doors open at 5. He's like, "Go find a place to hide out. I'll come check on you if I can, but like you're gonna have to chill." So walk up, found the first bathroom I could find right off the elevator, chilled out in a stall, and sat there for 3 hours. And pre-smartphones, mind you. So like the iPhone, I think it just come out. I certainly didn't have one. I think my phone had like a putt-putt golf game on it. So I blew through that after about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And all the while I'm sitting there, I'm like, if someone comes in here and realizes that like this same pair of shoes has been down there for 2 hours, like they're going to get suspicious. So I moved a couple times. Like I shifted between the stalls. A couple guys came in to use the bathroom. I was like sweating bullets. And then at one point, like door opens actually, and the guy knocks on the wall. He's like, "Ozzy, is that you?" And it's my buddy. He goes, "Here, I got game notes. You get something to read." So he hands me like the packet of game notes under the stall. And then like 5:30 rolls along, whatever time it was. Again, I don't remember when the doors opened exactly for that particular game. But he comes out. He goes, "Yo, there's people in the building. You can probably come out now." But even then, like right when the doors open, even back then, with the fervor around the team was so hot.
Sure.
It's still pretty quiet in the 200 level. So there were a few things that played in my favor. First of all, I'm sure that there were 100 other things that security people were looking for other than some asshole hiding in a bathroom stall. But also, like, once I got out there were enough people milling around like the Harbor Club bar. And back then you didn't buy tables. Like the tables weren't ticketed like they are now. It was just like common space. So I just hung out at a table kind of near some people. And as it got closer and closer, the arena got fuller and fuller. And I was like, "Oh, I'm like, we're going to pull this thing off." And we did. And so that game that game was unfortunately a loss. They lost in double OT. Joe Corvo scored the winner, but it was an unreal game. Buffalo scored like 30 seconds in, something like that. Thomas Vanek scored, and it got waved off because it hit his glove. So they waved the goal off. And he scored, though, like another minute and a half later. Like, so a really early goal for Buffalo. The place was electric. And then they're losing for the whole game. Danny Breer tied the game with like 7 or 8 seconds left. And honestly, it was almost an identical situation to Drury's goal the round before. Super late situation, goalie pulled, Potts a goal to tie it, super late. We're jumping up and down. So, and we stood the whole game, obviously. We didn't have tickets. And so, like, we're in a standing room kind of area there in the 200 level. I think it's over now, kind of near the, like that Seneca Sports Lounge. I'm pretty sure that's where we stood. We're hugging random people. It was unreal. And then, of course, they lose in double OT, and we got to drive home at like 12 o'clock, all pissed off. But it was
Was it worth it?
It was, though, honestly. Like, I mean, I never did anything like that again, but it was just like, "Hey man, I think I can sneak you into this game. Do you want to try it?" And I'm 21 years old, an idiot. Like, I was like, "Yeah, why not? We'll go for it. It'll be fun." And we did it, and it was great. So, we haven't done anything that stupid since, I don't think, but that was one of the dumber things I tried. It was fun, man. It was an unbelievable game. I'll never forget going to that one, even though they lost. It was a good one.
I don't think you'd have to worry about anybody looking for you in the bathroom these days with this team, though. And I'm glad you brought up that point, too, because, you go back 20 years or so, like you said, to your point, like, it would be a lot easier to kill if you were hiding today for whatever reason and you had to kill 3 hours. Having a smartphone today would be a hell of a lot easier between social media apps and, much more advanced games and things like that. It would make the time go a lot quicker, but... Well, that is definitely interesting. That's for sure, man. The other thing that I want to ask you about, too, before we get into some actual hockey stuff, let's kind of flip gears here a little bit because all right, so what's going on with soccer? Right now, I'm clueless about this right now. Right, I've barely followed along. I believe Reed Ferguson was involved at one point with the stadium or the team or whatever. Kind of educate me, and for people who are listening to the show, what's going on? Again, I'm clueless. I've barely followed along. I know there was a soccer stadium that was going to get built downtown, and now apparently it's not. Explain to me as best you can what the hell it's all about, what's going on. I know you've written about it. I know you've talked about it.
Yeah, we had Pete Marlette's a local guy. We actually had him on the podcast to talk about the team. He's trying to bring a USL Soccer team to Buffalo, which is like the second tier pro soccer in the U.S. It's not on the same level as the MLS, but it's a competing league, so it's not like specifically minor league baseball either. It's kind of a weird dynamic in terms of the U.S. soccer pyramid. But either way, he's bringing a team to Buffalo, or he's working to bring a team to Buffalo. I'm pretty sure Reed Ferguson is one of the investors, if not mistaken, or a brand ambassador or something like that. I don't remember his exact role. But so he's working on bringing this team to Buffalo. The initial plan was for them to start play next year, and their stadium plans call for what's called a modular stadium. So it's a faster build. It's not like a true brick and mortar ground up stadium project that you might see with, like if you were to compare it even to the baseball stadium downtown. And they've been going through all the processes, gathering investors, for the ownership group and all that good stuff. I've tried to follow that as closely as I could. And I've stayed pretty well up to date with everything. And they had initially picked a stadium location in the city, right downtown, Cobblestone District, the HSBC Atrium lot, which is now owned by Doug Jamal. That was, I think, kind of like their preferred choice. The issue with that at the time when it was announced was that they were going to need about $20 million, I think, in state funding, so public funds. And I think, and they even acknowledged, like, we understand that this is going to be a heavy lift. It's kind of a bad time to be asking in terms of like when the state budget was put together and stuff like that. And so they had other sites in mind. One thing that Pete said specifically to us on our podcast, but he said in other places, like he's committed to building the stadium in the city. He's not building it elsewhere. He's going to be downtown. He's not screwed around with a suburban location.
Okay.
UB or anything like that. And so all their sites were in Buffalo, within the Buffalo city limits. And so they kind of regrouped and reconfigured their plans when they found out that they weren't going to be able to do it at the Cobblestone site. They settled on a site close to Larkin, not in Larkin, but close. It's about a mile away on Elk Street. And that's over, for anyone who's been to the Powerhouse, it's like right across the street from the Powerhouse on Elk. But the issue there is it's where Madai built their sports facility. The issue there is that it is next door and downwind from a company called PVS Chemicals. I don't know all the details to that. I know that it's like a sulfuric acid sort of thing. So like it stinks over there at times, like it's smelly. And PVS Chemicals, and I believe someone else basically came out and said, like, we're not in support of this. This is not the right use for the land. We were against the Madai complex as well. This is not a good choice. And so Buffalo Pro Soccer, they were kind of pushing back at some point, but I have to assume, and this is just an assumption, this is not fact-based, I've got to assume that PVS Chemical and whatever the other stakeholders who were there pushing back were going to say, we're going to sue to stop the project. Like, we will file a lawsuit to prevent you from building here. And so that's my guess as to what happened. So Buffalo Pro Soccer, they're resetting. They're kind of going to regroup, and they're going to go and look elsewhere. And so there's been some positive momentum there in terms of, like, maybe they have more investors than they initially planned. Maybe that Cobblestone site is more affordable now. So potentially they could go back downtown, right downtown, I should say. But they're looking at other areas. There was a Buffalo News report that even suggested like I don't know if they said unknown or not secret, but an unknown or undisclosed waterfront location. So I don't know what that means exactly, but that'd be interesting too. So the only downside to all this is that it delays their start. They're not going to play next year. They're going to have to wait till 2027. So pushing that out is disappointing. I would be, the pessimist in me is like, oh, geez, like another year of waiting on a minor league team is tricky. That gets tricky at times.
Yeah.
But if it means they're going to build the stadium in a better location, I'm all for it. So.
I really hope it works out. It would be nice to have soccer here again. I remember growing up as a little kid, when the Buffalo Stallions were still a thing. Remember Randy and Rudy, the Bigaszewski brothers?
I remember the names. Yeah, I don't remember
Yeah.
the Stallions all that well, but I remember
Yeah.
the names for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I think they might have been the Blizzard too
Oh,
later
okay.
on after. Yeah. I actually lived with Randy for a while before, back in the day, man. That was my buddy, man. Fastest dude you'll ever see in your life. But anyway, yeah, I hope that works out. It's look, I know Buffalo's not exclusive. There's so many cities where there's promising things that come, and you're gonna hear about them, and you kind of get yourself a little bit excited, and then ultimately they don't work out. I know Buffalo's not the only city, but I hope the soccer thing works out. I remember hearing about the big golf thing that was going to get built.
That's supposed to go right down the street from them.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know when
who
that's coming.
knows?
So,
I know
yeah.
Stevie Johnson's been talking about bringing arena football to Buffalo, but that kind of stalls out too. So hopefully all's well that ends well. I'd love to see some soccer at whatever level I would be. I'm sure a lot of fans would as well. As we get into the Sabres, before we talk about this recent team, again, going back to Twitter, there's an account called Sabres Classics, which I just discovered recently, and they don't do anything except post clips from the past, and some of them have been really interesting. And yesterday, well, we're recording this on Thursday, so yesterday being Wednesday, I saw on their account a video of a News 4 broadcast where there was outrage among Sabres fans stemming from Potter's Field, surprisingly not, in South Buffalo. I love, by the way, Potter's Field, one of my favorite spots. Love that place, especially to go eat. Anyway, they interviewed Channel 4, a bunch of fans who were pissed the hell off because the Sabres, in their mind, did Tim Kennedy dirty. They got rid of him. I don't remember this well. You do. And then you were tweeting about it a little bit. I was like, no, I don't want to look because I want to wait till I have you on the show today to kind of explain. But for people out there who remember, South Buffalo's own Tim Kennedy, I should probably put that out there, why South Buffalo especially was outraged about that. But other Sabre fans is too. Tells you, this shit has been going on with the Sabres now. But take us back 15 years ago. Sabres fans being pissed off over Tim Kennedy. What happened with Tim Kennedy that pissed these mainly South Buffalonian Buffalo Sabres fans off?
Yeah, so the Sabres bought him out right after his salary arbitration hearing. So he and the Sabres went to salary arbitration. He was awarded $1 million. So assume the Sabres came in and said they wanted to pay $700,000, and Kennedy came in and said, I want to get $1.4 million, and they settled in the middle at $1 million. And that's almost always what happens with these arb hearings. They're pretty cut and dry in terms of how it all goes down, but or at least in terms of how the award is calculated. But Kennedy gets $1 million award, and the Sabres, and this is at the time of Tom Golisano, and this is very much in the height of the Golisano is too cheap for them to win phase, because you're post Drury Briere, you are post Campbell, and so it's like right in the mix of those the end of the Golisano era, just before Pagula's coming in to buy the team, when it was really like a lot of heat out there of like, man, they never spent any money.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that sounds familiar to now.
It sure does.
But so $1 million reward, and it was later reported that the Sabres basically were pissed because they thought it was $300,000 too much, or even like $300,000 more than they had budgeted for internally in terms of their cap spending. And so they bought him out because his age was a 1/3 buyout. And funny enough, the buyout cost was $333,000. So they actually spent more money to buy him out and prove a point than they would have if they had just paid him. So it was a really bizarre set of circumstances, as you could imagine. He wasn't any sort of a game-breaking talent for them, but he was a useful player. He'd been good enough for them, and I think he would have been part of their plans. But he gets bought out. Obviously, South Buffalo was furious, but I think a lot of people were like, "What are we doing here?" It's $1 million award. It's a very small salary. Even then, in terms of where the cap was, $1 million was not much to worry about in terms of paying a player, and they bought him out because of a $300,000 difference. It was just very much a very, very good representation of where fans felt, what fans felt about ownership then, and also really how ownership was operating the team. And so certainly not the beginning of the end of that era of Sabres teams. That was like the Miller Lucic hit, but emblematic of the era for sure. No question about it.
So I feel like you kind of answered it already, though, because what I was going to follow up and ask you was if Tim Kennedy from South Buffalo was Tim Kennedy from Garden View, New Jersey, and the same exact thing happened, Sabres fans would still be pissed off because it felt like a cheap move. I kind of felt like watching that clip going back from 15 years ago. Again, a lot of emotion from those fans, and I think in part because it was their neighborhood guy, but it was more than just because it was a neighborhood guy. You're saying it was kind of like an indictment even at the time of how the organization was just operating, generally speaking, right?
And I do think, to your point, if Kennedy had been born in Cleveland, people would have just been like, that was weird. Why would they do that? And then they would have moved on quicker.
Yeah.
You certainly wouldn't have had News 4 would not have gone to the local watering holes to ask people's opinion. Um, they would not have held an Irish wake for him at Potter's Field if he was from Cleveland. Um, but that being said, I think people still would have, it would have raised their eyebrows. But yeah, definitely, it would have been a different take. It's the same thing like with Pat Kane. Like for a while there, everyone's like, "Oh, this is the offseason. They get Pat Kane. This is when they get him." Even as his powers were diminishing, if he had been Pat Kane from Arizona, everyone would be like, "Yeah, there's other free agents they could go after." So
Right.
yeah, the local angle definitely plays more into it than otherwise. But it was still a very bizarre set of circumstances, no question.
Yeah, and when it comes to Pat Kane, he re-signed with Detroit. So he did that before I had a chance to
Yeah.
ask you if this was going to be the summer. That was part of my plan, especially after Paterka was gone. Right away, I'm like, I wonder if they're trying to get a short-term JJ Paterka type with Pat Kane. And, of course, he ends up going back to Detroit. Before we talk about any specific moves, Chris, how annoying is it? Let's remove the objectivity, writing for your blog, doing your podcast, this podcast, whatever it may be, and put your Sabres fan hat on, okay? How annoying and infuriating is it, or maybe it's not to you, that this team right now, is operating with what feels to me like absolutely no urgency. Like if I had just taken if I just woke up from a 6-month coma, okay, and I'm seeing what the Sabres are doing right now, my first thought would be, all right, well, this is a contending, this is a playoff team, or this is a team that was damn near the playoffs, that they're just they're tweaking it up, they're retooling a little bit. Doesn't feel to me like a team that hasn't made the playoffs in forever. It feels like now at this point anyway. There just doesn't seem to be any urgency with this team, from Kevin Adams' comments to some of the actions, which again, we'll talk about a couple of specific things here, but no, wow. And I know you've been on this show plenty now, and we've had conversations about, or off-season previews, so to speak, what they might do. Keep the pick, trade the pick, what free agents out there, trade targets, all this stuff. I just don't feel like this team has really done much. One big trade, which was kind of a lateral trade, which we'll talk about here, but I don't know. Generally speaking, do you feel like there's any urgency with this team right now? Because I don't. If there is, I don't see it.
No, it doesn't seem that way. I think that's a good way to look at it, is that they're just very content with their players. And I don't know if where does the blame lie? Is it because ownership is, really doesn't want them spending directly to the cap? Because even after, if you assume Byram resigns and then whatever Timmons gets, they'll wind up with, like, I don't know, like $4 or $5 million in cap space probably, which is more than they spent last year, but not a ton, and it's certainly not spending to the cap. And then if you also factor in the fact that, $4 million of their cap is going to Jeff Skinner's buyout, so, in a sense, you're not spending $8 million on the roster if you want to look at it that way. That's a little bit of creative accounting, but still,
Sure.
yeah, like it just doesn't track. Chris Baker made a great point on his show this week, where he pointed out that not only has Kevin Adams not traded his picks or prospects and picks, but even going back to Darcy, there was always this hesitation to spend picks and prospects. Obviously Tim Murray made his fair share of deals. Let's not pretend like no one's done it, but certainly big picture, like the Sabres for the last 15, almost 20 years have always been very, very conservative with trading picks and prospects to a fault almost. And so for a general manager who last year said, again, like he said last year, win now mode, we're going for it, whatever it was that he said exactly. And then he did very, very little to suggest that he was going for it. And now he comes back this offseason with almost the exact same game plan. He extended his guys. Jack Quinn got a bridge deal. He got a couple players on the fringes with like Justin Danforth and the Connor Timmins trade. And then, we'll see what happens with Byram, how that all shakes out. But, no splash acquisitions, no one at the top of the roster in terms of like a real difference maker acquisition. And he's done it now, certainly for the last 3 seasons. 22-23, they missed the playoffs by 1 point. Everyone's like, oh, they're close. Like, this group is getting it. Like, a couple more saves, they would have been a playoff team. And they roll Devin Levi and Luukkonen and at the time Eric Comrie, like they had that 3-headed monster, but like it was kind of like, oh, we think Levi's going to be the guy for us, and then he wasn't. But 22-23, no huge acquisitions. They're counting on continued internal growth and that their guys are going to get them over the hump. And then 23-24, well, Jack Quinn got hurt, and maybe we would have done 2 or 3 things differently, but still, like, the same group comes back. No big changes. 24-25, the same group is back, save Jeff Squinter, swapped for Ryan McLeod effectively. And now here you are again, like yet another offseason. And it's like, well, you've got a new 4th line center possibly in Justin Danforth or winger. And obviously you have the Paterka trade, which we can talk about more if we need to. But, again, like the core of the forward group, certainly the forward group, remains largely unchanged. The top of the forward group, you've lost Paterka. We'll see how they're going to replace his offense, but he's gone. The rest of the group, roughly the same. You roll it back to last year, almost all their attention was paid to reforming the identity of the bottom of the lineup and improving that 4th line to make them harder to play against was the big talking point last year. And all the work that they did, the only guy left is Beck Malenstein, and you can make a case that he'd be their extra forward. So you might not see a single one of their 4th liners from last offseason on opening night. And then here we are again this offseason having the same conversation, both us having the same conversation, but also Kevin Adams talking about being harder to play against. We need to be tougher and all that stuff. So I have to think that either he's looking at the wrong things, he's focusing too much on the toughness aspect and the identity, or he just doesn't have the willingness or ability to make that big trade.
Yeah, it's infuriating to me. Anyway, let's take a real quick break, come back, plenty more coming up here with Chris Ostrander. Guys, if you haven't gone already, make sure you do. MafiaCon 2 is coming to Seneca 1, July 19th, 10:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Vendors, food, plenty of Buffalo Bills, especially the rookie class, autograph opportunities, personalities will be there, Bills super fans. There will be plenty of live podcasts, including this one. I'll be doing a live show with Tim Graham there at 12:45 p.m. Go to buffalomafia.com for more information and to get your tickets. All right, I'm back here with Chris Ostrander, and before the break, we're just talking about the frustration, maybe more so with the some than others, but I'm just at that point right now. If you're a fan, how do you even hold on to hope? Because you talked about it so perfectly before the break. Internal growth is obviously what they're banking on, with kind of like little supplementary pieces here and there that you think could help the team. It's kind of in the Bills' philosophy in a way over the last handful of years. The difference is the Bills are a very good team, and they're not trying to break the bank, but they will. They'll go spend money on Joe Bosa. They spend money on Von Miller. They will take bigger swings. It just is it that they can't, or is it that they're unwilling to? That's, I guess, what I'm trying to balance or come to grips with in my mind right now. I refuse to believe that Kevin Adams could be stupid to the point that he can't possibly be thinking about, where the state of the fans are with this hockey team right now. And to put on the ice a team with, and again, a lateral trade, and we did talk about, in fact, I had you on right after the trade, the Paterka Kesserling trade. Not a bad trade. Pros and cons to it, and you laid them out last time. But beyond that, it's just, I don't know, man. It's just a bunch of, who cares? It's a bunch of doesn't matter to me right now. It's not going to improve a team that was, 12 points out from making the playoffs. Where am I seeing this jump? We're relying on a lot of what ifs yet again, which I believe you talked about that in your latest show too. But how do you believe in this team right now if you're a fan? I mean, I don't know how you could sell fans anymore. It feels like we're out of gimmicks now. I just don't even know what they could do.
Yeah, there's no rope left to give, right? It's just that's where I've settled on, is that they, and again, I want to go back to last offseason. I've said this to people before, but he said last offseason, when he was pressed on the cap and the Skinner buyout and not using that money, or maybe this was during the season, I might be messing up my timeline, but talks about the fact that he needs money, and you need cap planning for restricted free agents. We need to make sure that we don't overspend now, because we have JJ Paterka coming up, Devin Levi. They had a handful of restricted free agents that they were going to need to potentially pay, which is a fair enough point. At the time, I pointed out often, saying like, well, that doesn't mean you can't sign a guy for 1 year and then still have the cap next offseason. But fast forward 12 months later, JJ Paterka's gone. Jack Quinn got a fine bridge deal, but I think some would argue maybe got a little bit too much. I think it was a fine cap hit overall, but he gets a bridge deal, so he's not getting big money. Devin Levi's going back to Rochester. His cap's not even going to hit Buffalo's cap during the year, and Bowen Byram may or may not be traded. So all of that cap planning that they needed to make sure they were careful for went up in smoke. So either they were lying to you, and Kevin Adams was lying either just right to your face or on behalf of his owner, or they really just don't have a real plan. And now this year, just last week, 2 weeks ago, last week, he's talking about, well, we are prepared to match a Bowen Byram offer sheet, and we planned for this. Our cap strategy, fit a Bowen Byram offer sheet into the mix, which could be true. I'm not. That's not quite as much of a bald-faced lie as last year's was, I think. But they, then they do the club elected arbitration and eliminate an offer sheet. So now I think that was more strategic, to their credit, but still overall, like there's always an excuse that they're not spending all their money, that they're not being as aggressive as they possibly can be. All of this also ignores the fact that you're allowed to go over the cap by like 10 or 20% in the off season. If you go look on Puckpedia right now, there's like 4 teams that are over the NHL's salary cap, and they have work to do. It makes more work for the general manager, heaven forbid. But it is an option. You have the ability to spend more in the off season and then sell off some pieces. You are Kevin Adams, whether or not you're aware of this, you are allowed to trade more than one player at a time. So yeah, like it's like the lack of action. Like I can get behind people who have optimism for it. It's fine. There's reasons that you could look at and be like, okay, Jack Quinn is now a full year removed, recovery wise, health wise. Maybe he does get back to the player you saw that kind of that rookie year with the Cousins Paterka line when it looked so good. And maybe Josh Norris does stay healthy. Maybe the surgery he had means that he's a healthier, more effective player. And so there are reasons that it could work. I get that. And so if you want to be optimistic for those reasons, by all means, go for it. But I'm just out of it. Like I have nothing left in the tank for him. And so I mean, I hope that they make the playoffs. I want them to make the playoffs. But in terms of when I look at the roster and how they're made up, I certainly don't expect them to make the playoffs. And I'm not going to throw $20 on DraftKings, no matter how long the odds are and how good the payout would be, just because I have next to no faith that this is a playoff team right now. Even with like Kesselring added, who's a player I really like.
And like you just said, if you want to be optimistic and go, live in the optimism house, that's cool. And I'm actually more all power to you. I kind of wish I could get myself in life a little more often to that optimistic place when, I'm pessimistic about something. It's a good attitude to have, I guess. And it makes life a little bit easier to live, whether it's the Sabres or just life in general. But, and I will add one thing. I had my buddy PK from Buffalo Sports Collective on just yesterday. And he brought up a good point about Kesselring. It's not even so much what Kesselring will be as a player, which obviously that matters a ton too. But he made the point that if Kesselring could be the guy that plays with Owen Power and helps unlock Owen Power to be the best player, the best version of himself, what we've hoped that Owen Power will become, if playing with Kesselring is what ignites that, then that does make that a better trade. Not just what Kesselring does, but what it does for Owen Power, hopefully, as well. So again, it's another thing to throw in a little branch of optimism there. Look, at the end of the day, they're just not doing enough. And like kind of like your heart of hearts, do you feel it's more a case of an owner right now who's saying, look, I'm not going to change the way I spend. I'll spend money on my own guys when I want to get them locked up, but I ain't paying more than $10 million for a guy to come here, which is like factual because that's been the case other than the Norris trade. I think going back as free agents since Okposo, I believe.
Yeah.
But is it more a case of the owner being, when it comes to this team, let's just call it what it is, a cheapskate. Look at the coaching staff right now. Is it the owner being a cheapskate, or is it, maybe Kevin Adams is saying, hey, man, I'd love to get me Mitch Marner. I'd love to get one of these prime free agents or one of these big swing guy trades with a guy who doesn't have a no trade clause. But guess what? I call and they hang the freaking phone up on me, man. They don't even want to talk to me right now. You think it's more a case of that's what it is? They want to, but nobody wants to come here? Or do you think it's a case of the owner who just, despite all the bullshit talk from Kevin Adams, just doesn't have a real commitment to winning?
I think when it comes to some of the offseason stuff, I look more at Pagula. So this requires a caveat. Like Mitch Marner sounded like he was really dead set almost on going to a Western Conference team and maybe specifically Vegas. So they may not have been in that sweepstakes to begin with. Nikolai Ehlers, for example, probably looked at it and said, like, I want to go to a winning team. I don't want to play for a team like Buffalo. So there's pieces surrounding Buffalo's work that are working against them. And I would also point out, I think was it Thad Brown who tweeted the thing about the $10 million contract?
I think so.
It's factually correct. There's nothing wrong with what he said. The one thing I push back on with that is free agency is almost always a boondoggle. So the fact that the Sabres haven't overspent in free agency isn't a damning indictment of how they operate. It's my bigger issue is that they aren't spending assets in trades. You almost rarely ever see a really, really good free agent class. Mitch Marner technically didn't even make it this year, even though I think that's full technicality. He was a free agent, right?
Yeah.
But like everyone's talking about next year's free agent class, like it's just this incredible for class. And dollars to donuts, by November, half those guys are going to be assigned to extension. So I don't get too excited over free agency. The Okposo move was exciting at the time. It was a great thing to see him do. And if you get those premier talents, and not that Okposo was a premier talent, but when you get premier players in free agency, you would hope the Sabres are going after them. But to bring it back to my thought on Pagula, my concern is that he has whatever his internal budget is for this team, whatever the internal cap is, should it exist, and I think it does, it is preventing Kevin Adams from being more aggressive in pursuit of trades. Now, Kevin Adams, it sounded like, was pretty close to getting Elias Pettersson at or near the trade deadline. So Josh Norris probably doesn't come. I would assume it would have been like Cousins and Byram. I think that was like the rumor going around. Darren Dreger was talking about that since like October. But assume for now it would have been Cousins and Byram going for Pettersson. Now, the cap would have been relatively flat, but you're still acquiring an $11 million player. And so that's where I think some of the issues lie, is that you have an owner who's saying, well, we can't spend more than let's call it $5 million. Let's say $5 million under the cap is that's the hard line, right? He wants to save $5 million on the roster. It is then causing Kevin Adams to look at it and say, okay, well, maybe we'll just keep Jack Quinn instead of trading for this guy. Or we're going to hold on to Peyton Krebs instead of packaging him with Bowen Byram in a bigger trade, whatever it may be. Krebs isn't that expensive, but you get the point.
Sure.
So I think that's a big part of it, is that Pagula, if that internal cap does indeed exist, and there's very few signs left to suggest that it doesn't. That's where it's hamstringing them, because you're now stuck trying to think about flat cap trades, or kind of like negotiating smartly, because you know that if you're going to go and get an $8 million forward, you may need to offload a $2 or $3 million player elsewhere. Because, and this is like very much like a late era Golisano thing too, like the not Brad Boys, the Dominic Moore trade. If you want to remember some guys, when they acquired Dominic Moore, they traded Clark MacArthur. That was the next year. They traded Alesh Kodalik that same deadline, and so it ended up being like a flat cap thing. So to give you kind of an idea of that, so that's what my worry is that whatever the internal cap is and however it exists is affecting what sort of negotiations that Adams can make. With all that being said, Adams just isn't getting it done. And I don't know if it's a case of like, is he afraid to offer too much? Is he gun shy or whatever? But, a lot of the moves they've made this year are very much that of a guy who thinks like, okay, if I don't make the playoffs this year, I'm out. But we're going to try to get like that last playoff spot. We're going to improve on the fringes to the point where we think we can compete with like Ottawa, Montreal, and the Islanders, and we'll sneak into the 8th spot, and that'll be good enough. Whereas thinking more strategically, more aggressively would probably be more beneficial to them. I think both short and long term, quite frankly.
It goes back to kind of my original point, like the title of this podcast. It's the lack of urgency. It doesn't. This is Kevyn Adams' last year of his contract. You don't need to be fired after this year. We talk about him getting fired the last couple of years. That's not necessary. Just he's not going to get his contract renewed if Terry Pegula doesn't want him back. Then you have to fire him. Ditto with Lindy Ruff. It just feels like I keep going back to where's the urgency. And I'll tell you, I do feel there is a part of me, because Kevyn Adams just gets dragged on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of it is deserved. But there's also a part of me that has a little bit of sympathy towards Kevyn Adams, because some of the shit is just straight up him taking bullets for Terry Pegula. First of all, there's a lot of pressure on Kevyn Adams every time he speaks, because this is a team with an owner who will not speak. So Kevyn Adams is literally the voice of the organization, because you are not going to hear from the owner. You're just not going to. And so he's got to worry about that. That might bring some stress. It's led to some really dumb comments like the palm tree thing, all that stuff, blah, 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 blah. But then there's other times where I just think he's taking a bullet for Terry, because I'll give you an example, like the coaching staff. Matt Fairborn, in his article that he wrote not too long ago about the hamster wheel thing, said that when he spoke with Kevyn Adams said he's not afraid to talk to Terry and say what's wrong with this team. And he mentioned specifically the defense and special teams. Well, what got done about that? Absolutely zero. And at Kevyn Adams' more recent presser, he kind of pushed back and talked about, Lindy knows what he's doing. He's been at this for a long time. If Lindy didn't want to coach, blah, 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 blah. I refuse to believe that Lindy Ruff has signed off and this is the coaching staff that he wants. He wants his whole staff back. He didn't want any additions. He didn't want any firings. I refuse, absolutely refuse to believe that. Lindy might be playing good soldier right now. Also, he's not really speaking at all right now at this time anyway. I'm sure he will. But to me, that's just an example of Kevin kind of taking a bullet for Terry, saying Terry ain't going to spend no money on new coaches right now. He's not going to fire coaches and hire more coaches, despite what Kevyn Adams says. So it's at times Kevyn Adams is lying, but I also think, Chris, that he's lying and doing so by taking bullets for the owner. I'm starting to get more annoyed with the owner.
Yeah, he's got to deflect it. No, I'm with you there. I think, like the coaching staff point is a great one, because, not only is Adams' contract up, or at least we believe it's up at the end of this year, but I think Lindy signed a 2-year deal when he came on last year, so he would be up. And by all accounts, all of their staff contracts, the major ones, end at the end of this year. So if Terry Pegula is just running out the clock on the staff, like, is he just going to light a season on fire here and then come back with a new coaching staff? But is that the way he's going to operate? Because that's no way to win. I think a more serious owner, a more serious organization would have looked at this season, 2 years of regression, very minimal changes. Like, you probably don't bring back your general manager. You certainly don't bring back your special teams coaches who who failed you at almost every turn, and yet all of these guys are back, at least for right now. And it's getting late enough in the off season here where it doesn't seem likely that you'd see more staff changes. Never say never, but
Right.
the writing's on the wall. But yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that very much traces back then to Pagula, and I even have issues like I know it was like Hamilton and Harrington, one of the two of them, were like, this is like this roster has Lindy Ruff's fingerprints all over it. And I said this on my podcast this week. I was like, why do we want them to have Lindy Ruff's fingerprints all over it? Like, his teams have not made it out of the playoffs in quite some time. The best teams that he had in New Jersey were not the exact opposite of this, but they certainly had more skill. And there were more skilled, more effective players in key positions than you see here in Buffalo. And so, like, do I want Lindy Ruff's view on this? Like, is Lindy Ruff actually the guy that you want in that seat making those decisions, or should Kevin Adams be exerting a little bit more control and getting less of a consensus in some ways? That's a red flag for me on like it's related to the coaching staff, but it obviously ties into the roster construction too. But the fact that it strikes me that Terry is often out of or short on ideas, and so they're left scrambling. It's just so very little strategy and so much more of a reactionary way of operating, and I don't think it certainly is not treating them well. They've not reacted well to it.
A full year later, so I still wonder, was Lindy Ruff's hiring a Terry Pagula PR move? There was no kind of extension. There certainly was no extensive head coaching search, that's for sure. So I almost felt like kind of predetermined there that that's what they were going to do. I don't know. Here's what I do know, though. As a fan right now, I feel like the fun of rooting for this hockey team, the true, passionate, caring. I want to go to the bar with my buddies and get some wings, and I'm not doing this. I want to make sure I'm at the bar because I want to watch the Sabres game tonight. The passion that fans have had for so long, it just feels like it's being sucked away right now with this team. And look, maybe we'll talk 6 months from now, and maybe some of the things they didn't do will prove to be the right move.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, like you said, maybe power gets unlocked. Jack Quinn takes that next step. Norris could stay healthy. Maybe a lot of these things, and we're being overreactionary right now, and maybe staying the course ends up being right. But you're not going to sell fans on that, and they're not going to give you any more blind faith. Blind faith and giving you the benefit of the doubt, that is out the door. Do want to ask you one other thing, too. And I know it's only July, what is it, July 10th? I don't even know what the hell day it is right now. All right, it's July 10th. It's
Dude,
still
too many
early.
episodes this week, buddy.
It's still early. But the fact that Alex Tuch, no extension for him, that was something I might have expected to see at, 12:01 p.m., 4:01, whenever it started. I expected day one Alex Tuch to sign. Are you surprised at all that there's no extension yet, or not even any real news other than maybe they're still talking? Should that have our attention? And if for some reason he doesn't want to sign an extension and that comes out, Elliot Friedman, you start hearing stuff like that, is that like the ultimate indictment on this organization, that if you can't get Alex Tuch, who's a Sabre, through and through, if you can't get that dude to want to extend, what does that say about your organization? What are you feeling about that right now, if anything yet? Is it just too early still?
It's still early. I don't think it's necessarily time for, you don't have to go into the fallout shelter yet. But like my doomer view of it is that it to your point would be the harbinger of dread for this group. And I'll say this, like, maybe he doesn't want to sign because you won't spend any money on the roster. Like, hot take, I guess, but like maybe spend to the cap for a year, and maybe your veteran leaders will feel better about the direction of the team. I've heard so many people talk about this, like the fact that you had like that Darlene meeting before the Cousins trade, and apparently they talked with, if it wasn't just Darlene, like Darlene Thompson, maybe Tuck was involved in this too, about like hey, like how do you, like, we're trying to get this thing right, we want you guys to stay bought in and all that good stuff, and they wanted to make sure that the players understood what they were going to do, and I can't imagine. I wish I remember who tweeted this. They're like, there's no way that this is what they sold those guys on. Like, this can't be an offseason that they sold those guys on. So yeah, like if you don't spend on your roster and you look like a cheapskate for another offseason from an ownership perspective and then also GM, and there's no meaningful additions made to the group, like I can't blame a guy like Tuck for saying like, you know what, it's not going to happen here. I got to go. Like I got to get out to a winning organization. Again, it's very early in the process. He's not,
Yes.
there's still plenty of time for them to work this out. I'm not overly concerned about it from that perspective, but the warning signs exist. Maybe there's no lights blinking yet, but the warning signs are there, and that's where I would be worried if I was a fan. And again, if you want to take the kind of the doomeristic view of it early on here, but like they have not had an encouraging offseason thus far. They were not a good team last year, and so little has changed from that group. What are you selling him on other than saying like, no, we'll pay you $9.5 million, and that's it. Like, I can't help but wonder if like all of a sudden Alex Tuck's like, you know what, like I think the grass might be greener over there in you know Columbus or wherever he might try to sign.
Um, I'll say this. The offseason's not over yet, but I do feel comfortable in saying this is not an encouraging offseason, and it's not going to get encouraging. If you get a top 6 player by chance, it means you're giving up Byram and probably more to go get them. Or if you get any other significant player, you're probably trading Byram to go get them. Now, if they were to keep Byram and maybe find a package with Hellenius and a future draft pick or things like that, and they got a really useful player, maybe that would change my perspective, keeping Byram and still getting somebody else. But I just don't think that's going to happen. Second last thing here, talked about Tuck and that being the ultimate indictment. I don't know that that's realistic at this point, but here's what I do think and what I believe. I don't have any inside information, but I believe this. I think there was meat on the bone last year with the Rasmus Dahlin thing. I don't know that, he didn't come out and say, I want out or this and that, or shit better change right now or whatever. But I do think the frustration level of Rasmus Dahlin, if it's not there already, I feel like it's on the warmer.
Yeah,
it's getting
bubbling,
warm.
right? Yeah.
And another season of, his career just rotting away here where he's not even in the mix to make the playoffs as good as he is for as long as he's been there now. I do think that we're getting into territory where I'm not necessarily predicting it, but say come next January, February, the Sabres are in the same boat that we think they're going to be in, that you're not going to start hearing. It'll be more than just little whispers about Rasmus Dahlin being ready to say, you know what, get me out of here.
It's possible. I think it kind of mirrors what we just talked about with Tuck, right? It's the idea that the lack of investment, the lack of success is going to wear on, and it's worn on the fans. Like there's a lot fewer fans in that building every night than there was a few years ago. And so like you can't imagine why it wouldn't wear on the players too. The one thing I gotta wonder though, and this isn't necessarily assuming to your point, assuming it goes poorly, I would hope it's not Kevin Adams' problem come April or May. I mean, it could be with this owner, but hopefully you have a new general manager in place, and it's not Lindy Ruff. But I would almost have to think like you got to start playing hardball with some of these guys. Elliot Friedman on his last podcast pointed out like the Sabres keep losing control of situations. We went from hearing like JJ Peterka, like important player, don't want to trade them, really don't want to trade him, but we're going to hear calls to now he's gone because he was upset and didn't want to be here. Like Peterka had a little bit of leverage as a restricted free agent, but not that much. Dahlin's under contract. So is Tage Thompson. And you almost got to think like, are you going to go full hard rebuild like you did post Eichel even, which obviously that's not really worked out? Or are you going to try to keep some of your high skill players and continue to build around them? I just got to like, at what point do you as Kevin Adams or whatever the GM, whoever the GM is, says like, no, man, you're going to be part of our solution. Sorry. I know you're upset. I know it sucks. We got to fix it, but we can't possibly afford to trade you. No matter how good the trade offer for Rasmus Dahlin might be, if you're starting from scratch again, like you're talking about, like you're gonna make the playoffs by 2030. That's what I'm thinking about a bit here as more and more people maybe start talking about this. Like, when will Dahlin want out? Do you simply just say like, listen, dude, sorry, you signed a deal, you're here long term, we're gonna fix it, and you got to be part of the solution. He's going to be pissy, and then obviously that creates other issues for the team. But like, you can't keep trading these guys away. I'm sorry. You gotta, at some point, you gotta put your foot down and say like, no, JJ Paterka is too important for us offensively to let him dictate terms. Not the best example, but still, big picture.
Yeah.
Like, you got to start. I don't know. Someone's got to put their foot down here and say like, no, like, if we're gonna win, if we're gonna be successful, Darlene's got to be here. Tage has got to be here, and we got to turn, to your point, Consta Helenius and Bowen Byram into Jared McCann or whoever. That's one of my favorite players. Like, you got to get someone better. You got to improve. You got to improve your group. And so that's where I fall, is like, at some point, the ownership needs to accept that you got to spend to win, and the general manager's just got to grow a set and make a big trade. And whether that's Adams or someone else, they got to do it. You got to make a big swing if you're going to be serious, and they just haven't done it yet.
I couldn't agree more. And it's just, again, it goes back to the fan thing too about taking sides. Look, with the Bills right now, the Bills could trade Khalil Shakir for Andre Lazard, okay? Straight up. And give the Bills fans 48 hours and they will convince you that the Bills did the right thing. You know what I mean? They didn't, but the fans will believe it because they believe in the team. The Sabres, it's literally the complete and utter opposite. Put it this way, dude. If they do cave and Darlene wants out and they traded him, you can just blow the whole thing up. Kind of leading to my last question here. God, this sounds sickening to say, especially in July. This is the last thing thought I would be talking about with Chris Ostrander here in freaking early July after spending so many hours talking about what may or may not happen in the offseason. All right, let's get to New Year's. We'll get near Valentine's Day. This team's buried yet again. All right, you got a GM who's dead man walking. You got a head coach who's dead man walking. Players have mailed it in. They're so sick of it. They're so over it. This team ain't doing shit. They'll be sellers at the deadline, blah, 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 blah. Are we looking at a potential, it's time to tank again kind of mode right now with this team when in the second half of the season there is a quote-unquote alleged generational talent at the top of this draft? The gag for Gavin talk. Are we gonna have to live this shit again? Because I'm gonna tell you right now, if it gets to be New Year's and the Sabres are second or third from the bottom in the East, I'll be rooting for them to lose. Is that going to be something that picks up steam again? I sure hope not. But
we talked about this about 3 months ago.
Yeah, well, it never stops here.
Like, if you think about it, we talked probably back in, was it March? Probably around the deadline. And I said, I'm like, is it better? Like, what would you prefer, for them to have a hot end of the season and like maybe they look okay, and then Kevin Adams keeps his job and they keep all these guys around?
Yep.
And then, fast forward to July 10th and it's like, God damn it, Kevin Adams is still here. I hate Jack Quinn, and nothing changed. And like, would you, like, I would pose this question to any Sabres fan. Would you have preferred to watch James Reimer's hot streak? He's not back, right? They signed Alex Lyon, which I think was a good signing. But would you have traded James Reimer's hot streak for, let's call it, 5 spaces in the draft?
Well, so absolutely.
Versus picking 9th, right? Yeah. Again, and now that's effectively a tank argument, right? Like, would you have just accepted all those losses instead of wins, and they would have picked 4th instead of get 7th, but they got pushed back? So let's just say they went from 9th to 4th. I think I would have preferred they pick 4th. Sorry, not sorry. Because, again, like, maybe that means Adams is out. Maybe that means some of the coaching staff changes over. Maybe there's more urgency with how they manage their roster. And so I would look at it very similarly with Gavin McKenna. And Gavin McKenna is a far, far better prospect than anyone at the top of this year's draft. So it's an entirely different conversation from a talent perspective too. Like, I'm not going into October hoping for losses, right? Like, that's not the mindset. So I don't think you could really compare it to like those tank years where you were selling players off. You knew that you were 2 years out from being serious about building again, or 1 year out from being serious about building again. So it's a different mindset. But yeah, like, if it comes to February and they're horrible, I'm like, yeah, like, let it die on the vine, I guess. Like, I don't want to jump to too many conclusions about like what getting Gavin McKenna would mean for them. Chris Baker's gonna be so mad at me for saying that, but by the way, but like if you got to that point, like if picking ninth in next year's draft does not help you, it probably didn't help you this year for what it's worth. But picking ninth or seventh in next year's draft, that does not help you. Picking first, if they were to win the lottery, does. And there's too many things that can go into that to really get too deep into it now. But like, if they suck again next spring, you should not be hoping for a late season surge and a heroic march to 11th place. You just got to put the cruise control on and let that thing roll into the lake, because it's not, it's just, you're just doom and gloom otherwise. So like, yeah, like I guess big picture, if you're, late in the season and they suck, yeah, like you might want to start watching Gavin McKenna highlights. Otherwise, like, there's too much talent on this roster to certainly spend the whole season, but to spend any significant amount of time thinking like, well, Gavin McKenna is the answer. No, I think the answer is should come with Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin at the center of it. There's enough talent here that they could be a really competitive, good hockey team. They just keep shooting themselves in the foot. So
I want to be clear too. So for people who were rolling their eyes the moment I mentioned the word tank, I'm with you there. I'm not going into the fall. Bill season starts, go Bills, tank Sabres. That's not what I'm saying. I said, if it gets to be like Christmas, New Year's, a little bit later than that, and they're clearly out of it. And to your point, to end this past season, and I was kind of openly on Twitter, and got a lot of beefs with a lot of people on Twitter near the end of the regular season. I was rooting against the Sabres, but it wasn't because of the better draft pick. I mean, that played a role in it. I'm not going to say it didn't, but it was to your point. The last thing I want to see is this team finish well enough for them to have hope that they don't need to do as much.
Right.
Than what.
I think that's the bigger thing for me. Was the bigger thing for me too, is like, if you, again, rewinding to the spring, if you're not a fan of Kevyn Adams now and you weren't a fan of him then, a hot finish that would grant him a stay of execution would be one of the last things that you would probably otherwise want to see. And I would apply this to next year, to the 2026 draft pick. Like, I'd be very hesitant to trade that without any sort of lottery protection on it. I think if, a top 5 protected pick, I think that's maybe something I'd want to do. But otherwise, like, I would be open to shopping it again, like, not unprotected, as I said, but it's the same thing as last year's draft pick. It's the same thing as this year's draft pick. And I would apply this to Constant Helenius. I would apply it to Noah Ostlund. Their prospect pipeline kind of stinks now, but I guess you apply it to Yuri Kulik as well. Like, not a lot of deals out there that I wouldn't want to turn down for those guys if you're talking about a bigger trade package. Because again, you've got to start getting aggressive here. You can't keep banking on Jack Quinn to stay healthy or Owen Power to find a good partner. Not that he was a bad player last year, but like,
Right.
all of these things that you keep hoping are going to happen. I hope the power play is better. How about you just like get better players, get a better coach, like, and affect some change directly instead of hoping that everyone figures it out.
Yeah, and I was just looking as you were talking here as we finish up. Yeah, from March 23rd through April 8th, the Sabres had won 5 in a row. They won 8 out of 9. And you look back now, if they would have lost the majority of those because they had a losing streak after that, at least you ponder if maybe that prompts Pegula to fire Kevyn Adams, or if that prompts Pegula at the very least get rid of a couple coaches or just be a little more aggressive or something, because you can't even try to sell fans on hope that, hey, man, we were starting to get it right at the end of the year. You just wait till next year kind of deal. I don't know.
The flip side of it is the fact that with that 13-game losing streak, if you cut that thing in half, if you had the competence to cut it in half, either through coaching, players, or whatever it may have been, they would have been right in the mix of the thick of the playoff race. So like there's two sides to every coin.
Sure.
But again, given how it ended, given how it all went down, my question to fans would be, would you have traded that 9th pick and those wins for the 4th pick? Because not only could you have taken a better prospect, you could have also probably entertained a trade with the Islanders who wanted James Higgins, right? Like, so there's way more possibilities have opened up for you. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with the Sabres. Again, you got the Bowen Byram thing. Maybe they do something else. I don't know, man. But I feel like next time we talk, we'll be in Bills training camp mode too. So
Got
Chris
my
is
Bills training
obviously
camp shirt on.
Yeah, you do. You got I love it, man.
2007, baby. It still fits.
2007. There you
Yeah.
go. Yo, ain't nothing from 2007 still fitting me. I could
I think
promise you that.
this ran pretty big on me back then. That's the problem.
Good stuff, though, man. All right, make sure you follow Chris on Twitter. I'll put the links to all this stuff in the show notes for Twitter, the podcast, the blog, all that good stuff. Like I said, we'll get together again pretty soon, and we'll talk Bills, man. Appreciate you, dude.
Oh, no doubt. Thanks, man.
All right, guys, I'll be back actually with a bonus Podbag episode on Saturday to make up for no show on Monday. Talk to you guys then.